Inanna returns. Chapter 6. Dumuzi. Even though it may seem that I led a charmed life and was totally spoiled, things began to look pretty grim for me. In order to take my rightful place in the family of Anu, I had to marry someone whose genetic lineage would give me power. I had grown up competing with my brother Utu and the other young males, and I thought of myself as their equal. The idea of getting married and being dominated by anyone in this gene pool wasn't too thrilling for me. In Palladian culture, the feminine energy was revered, and the law allowed equal rights for women as well as the opportunity to express their inborn talents. However, the majority of women relied heavily on a good marriage to define their place in the world. You might say the Palladian females were considered equal to their men, but with conditions and parameters of those conditions were drawn by the individual nature of each woman. My brother Utu and of course my parents were constantly after me to make a powerful marriage, which would make our branch of the family all the more impressive. Utu would taunt me by asking if I wanted to end up like Ninhasag. I had seen the life of my great aunt Nin as an old maid spinster, and I didn't like the looks of it. Secure in the power they received through marriage, most of the women of my family quietly took their place at their husband's side. Quietly was a word I didn't much care for. I wanted power for myself. I didn't want to be controlled by anyone. Nevertheless, with all this pressure on me to get married, I began to look around and ask myself who was available that I found interesting. Enlil had succeeded in bearing a son by Ninhasag, another defeat over Anki, who had produced only daughters with her. The boy's name was Ninurta, and he was educated with Utu and me on the Nibiru. I had already spent too much time with Ninurta as a child, and we were always competing with each other, usually quarreling. His mother, Ninhasag, simply doted on him in a disgusting manner. He was so spoiled. Ninurta might be genetically suitable, but he was totally out of the question. Anki had several sons, but the only one who was available was the youngest, Dumuzi. Ah yes, Dumuzi. Even the name just leaves you just flat, doesn't it? Because Dumuzi was the youngest of Anki's sons, he had the lowliest job. He was assigned the office of royal shepherd. I wonder who made that title up. Okay, he was in charge of all the domestic animals on Terra. I know we all have to eat, and the flocks are very important to the survival of the Lulas. I've heard all these arguments from my brother Utu and my parents. But have you ever cozied up to the smell of sheep at the end of the day? My parents favored that match. I guess they couldn't wait to get me married off and out of trouble. I consoled myself with the thought of being part of Anki's family. I could usually get Anki to do something fun with me, and I had plans to become the Queen of Egypt. I saw myself floating down the Nile on a golden barge, reclining upon a bed of flowers and the crowds cheering. With the Emmys in my possession and a powerful marriage, my budding ambitions were beginning to take shape. So I married Dumuzi. Marriage was, well, marriage. Dumuzi wasn't very bright, and he was certainly no match for me. I think his older brothers had brutalized him considerably, especially Marduk, the eldest. Dumuzi was vain and selfish. He actually sat around gazing at himself in a mirror, expecting me to wait on him hand and foot. His mother lived for him, granting his every whim. I began to avoid Dumuzi as much as possible. I was so bored I took on extra duties at the temples of love. And as my temples came to be named, I would make all manner of excuses and fly my ship from temple to temple, inaugurating all sorts of new ceremonies. I was behaving exactly like modern day executives who go on business trips to get away from their wives. I created a host of new rituals that centered around Dumuzi and me as a gesture to pacify Dumuzi and our families. The rituals contain all this elaborate stuff about our marriage and lovemaking, about the shy bride and her wonderful husband. The first soap opera gave the Lulas ideals to model their own lives on. The rituals were designed to inspire them to produce children in a happy environment. For me, it was an escape to fantasy, fiction. I created my life in ritual the way I wanted it to be, but it wasn't. Maybe it was my lack of enthusiasm for Dumuzi that left us without a child. To secure our rights to power, there had to be a son to inherit that power. It was the law. But whatever the reason, we produced no heirs. So I got this idea. If everyone else had produced a child with their sister, why not Dumuzi? Anu and Antu had born Enlil. Enlil had produced that brat Ninurta with Ninhursag. I was inspired. It was easy to convince Dumuzi to seduce his sister. I raved on about his family's wonderful genetic lineage, and his narcissistic need to reproduce himself did the rest. The sister of Dumuzi was called Inanna, and she was terribly innocent, not at all ambitious like me. I arranged for my servants to prepare an elaborate picnic, complete with herbal wines to stimulate the libido. They were to meet on a beautiful hillside overlooking the flocks, and they were doing what all animals do in the spring. I had thought of everything that Inanna, naive as she was, didn't have a clue that she was being set up. After a glass of wine or two, Dumuzi got to the part about them having a child together, and the fun went right out of the picnic. Inanna protested. She had this idea about remaining pure for her husband, whoever that might be. Dumuzi tried to persuade her, but she outright refused. Dumuzi lost his control and raped her. I suppose it was those herbs I put in the wine, which are so effective on men. Rape. It was the one thing Dumuzi could not get away with. Not even Enlil had gone unpunished for this crime. Dumuzi and I had now given his elder brother Marduk a perfect reason to get rid of his little brother. Marduk had been systematically working to take control of Egypt for himself. Marduk doesn't like me, and he wasn't taking any chances with my ambitions of the dynasty I was hoping to create. Dumuzi ran to his mother and me, plagued with nightmares and forebodings of his death. We encouraged him to flee and made plans to meet him in secret with food and water. He could hide until things blew over, until I could talk to Anu and plead his case. But Marduk lost no time. His henchmen pursued Dumuzi into the hills and trapped him like a little rabbit. It was awful. Perhaps Marduk's men got carried away. Whatever actually happened that day, poor Dumuzi died from the radiation weapons heartlessly aimed at him. My husband was dead, and I was still childless. That was the moment I remember a useful Palladian law. If a man died without an heir, yet had a brother, that brother, whether he was already married or not, was bound to marry the widow and produce a child with her. Luckily, Dumuzi had such a brother, Nergal, so handsome and intelligent. I had always admired him. How unfortunate that he was already married to my half-sister in the underworld. Oh well, I never let little complications stand in my way. I decided to pay a visit to the blonde bombshell herself, the queen of the dark underworld, Aresh Kagal, to claim my rightful husband, her husband, Nurgle. That brings us to an end of chapter 6. When we return, we will be on chapter 7, and that will be Aresh Kagal. Man. So, definitely follow me on, if you will. Like, comment, subscribe positively. And follow me on IG at wisdom_is_ja. And appreciate everything. Peace. Free Larry Hoover. You heard?